Court. So he's very well known and a very well respected attorney. Back to you guys.
All right, John Huddy, thank you. Now joining us is former New Jersey Superior Court Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, first of all, would you consider that the former president has standing, if you will, to ask for a special master? Because most of us, if we have the FBI come into our residence and take stuff out, we can't say, oh, hold on, I'm going to negotiate with you on that.
Well, he absolutely, I disagree with the DOJ, Bob and Katrina. He absolutely has standing because it was his home that was invaded and some of his personal belongings were taken along with property of the federal government. So he certainly can make the motion. He certainly can make the application. And he certainly can ask for that. The problem is it's too little too late. The government has already examined everything that they have taken, except for a small amount of what even the government admits is attorney-client privilege. So the time, not that this happens to everybody or happens every day, but the time to ask for a special master is while the agents are there. So that if the special master is appointed, then the judge orders the FBI not to bring the documents back to the DOJ or to an FBI office, but to bring them to the special master's office. Because once the cat is out of the bag, once the federal prosecutors have seen all this stuff, there's not much to be gained by a special master.
So, Judge, you're really saying that the special master is kind of a moot point. So then why do you think that the former president's team is pushing so hard to get one at this point?
Well, the more rulings you can induce a judge to make, and gives you the more opportunities to explain your side of things in court. And as our colleague Huddy just said, this judge, it's kind of a surprise, but there is a rule that allows her to do it, having read just one side of the application, the Trump side, before the DOJ even filed their documents on Tuesday evening, said she's inclined to grant it. So I don't blame the Trump lawyers for doing this, but as I said, they should have done it 4 weeks ago when the FBI was physically there.
Give us your take on what do you think is going to happen. We know that you have notably come out and said you think there could be something. Could you describe what you're talking about is likely to unfold here?
I think that the DOJ has already decided to ask a grand jury in either Miami or Washington, D.C. to indict former President Trump. I make that statement reluctantly. It gives me no joy to say it, as you know, Bob, from all the years we've worked together. But I say it because I don't think that Merrick Garland and the DOJ, and I understand the federal mindset. I've worked with it for so many years. I know how prosecutors think. They would not have gone through all this unless they really had something there. And what they've tipped their hands on, the little that they've revealed to the public and what they've shared with Judge Cannon is more than enough to indict him and probably enough to convict him. So they won't do this before the election in November because the DOJ has a rule not to indict a political figure within 90 days preceding an election. But I think you can expect an indictment before Christmas.
And then, what do you anticipate would the next steps be? Because do you think they're actually going to attempt to arrest the former president and make that a big visual moment?
That would be outrageous and uncalled for. The president would voluntarily walk into a courtroom. The arraignment would take about 30 seconds, and he would voluntarily walk out. He's the most recognizable human being on the planet. There's no way he's going to defy or even be able to defy the court. Every constitutional protection conceivable will be recognized and honored by the court, and I hope by the DOJ.
Judge, if the former president simply had the material and wasn't doing anything with it, for instance, not selling secrets to anybody, just has it, is that a violation?
Yes, because again, the DOJ anticipated President Trump's defense, which is, I declassified everything. So
Right.
what they've charged him with is gathering, removing, and obstructing the ability of the FBI to find, not classified material, national defense information. It is always criminal to possess national defense information, whether classified or not, outside a bona fide federal government-owned secure place where mobile phones don't work, where iPhones don't work, where surveillance is impossible. So by saying, I have it, but I declassified it, he actually did the government a favor because he admitted that he has it, which is one of the things the government has to prove. Now they don't have to prove it. They have his own words acknowledging it.
Judge, last question for you from me. If they do indict the former president, what would he be allowed to do in terms of getting his name on a ballot if he does choose to run again for president in 2024?
Well, the Constitution only sets forth two requirements to be president. A natural-born citizen, which of course he is, and 35 years of age or older, which of course he is. So anyone that tried to suggest that an indictment or not being indicted is another qualification, I think that would be invalidated by a federal court. Stated differently, I don't think the indictment would prevent him from running for president at all. Knowing him, he'd use it quite well.
Let me ask you, my final question is it possible for the president, the former president, I'm not saying he would do this, should do this, or there's a foundation upon which he would have to do this. But if he came out and said, listen, I took some of this material, I didn't mean any harm by it, and through the whole process, I've learned this belongs to the government of the United States or the United States people, not to me, and he returned it. No harm done? Or is there something now we've crossed a line where there is no negotiation?
So now, Bob Sellers, I think you went to law school and you never told me. Because that is the type of negotiation that should have been going on before they raided his house, without being critical of any particular lawyers. If he had top-flight, sophisticated lawyers who were engaging every day with the DOJ, so his lawyers knew what the DOJ was doing, that's the type of negotiation they would have had. It might be too late for that now, I don't know. It certainly would be too late if he's indicted. But boy, would I push that hard if I were his lawyers.
Yeah.
All right.
Counselor Sellers.
Now,
All right, you heard it here first.
I didn't go the route you did. I'm glad you're here to tell us the real deal when it comes to law. Thanks, Judge.
Anytime, guys.
Thank you.